Good morning and welcome to World News here on TVP World. I'm your host, Diana Skaya. We begin this Sunday morning with the unfolding events in Ukraine. At least 6 people have been injured in Russian strikes on the country. 3 women were injured on an air assault on the southern Mykolaiv region late on Saturday. A video released by the State Emergency Service of Ukraine shows firefighters battling flames amidst the rubble of a house. In the capital, Kyiv, Mayor Vitali Klitschko reported 3 more injuries following a missile strike on the capital. Ukraine was placed on a nationwide air alert at 5 a.m. local time on Sunday as the Air Force warned of potential strikes, including on regions bordering Poland. Fires were reported in at least 3 districts of Kyiv. Staying on Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelenskyy thanked countries for condemning Friday's Russian ballistic missile strike on his hometown of Kryvyi Rih that killed 19 people, including 9 children.
Many around the world have spoken out after this attack, clearly condemning Russian terror. Anyone who sees this and does not turn a blind eye, who speaks the truth clearly and directly, deserves gratitude, not only from us in Ukraine, but from the whole world. Remaining silent about the fact that it is Russia that is killing children with ballistic missiles is wrong and dangerous. It only encourages the criminals in Moscow to continue the war and ignore diplomacy. Weakness has never ended a war. This is why I'm grateful to every country whose representatives have spoken out. Leaders, foreign ministers, embassies.
Poland scrambled fighter jets and placed its ground-based air defenses on the highest alert early on Sunday in response to the possibility for Russian attacks in western Ukraine. Poland's Armed Forces Operational Command wrote about the action on Platform X. As the coalition of the willing begins to establish its mandate and structure with Ukraine, President Zelenskyy says it shouldn't take too long to work out the details. However, it remains unclear when European troops will arrive in the country as Russia continues to delay a ceasefire. Now our Kyiv correspondent Oz Chatterjee has more.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy met with British and French military chiefs in Kyiv on Saturday, following on from talks between them and their Ukrainian counterparts about the potential technical aspects of a deployment force that the coalition of the willing, headed by Emmanuel Macron, French President, and British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, this deployment force to monitor any kind of potential ceasefire between the Russians and the Ukrainians in Ukraine. Now, these talks between Washington and Moscow haven't yet yielded any tangible results towards this ceasefire. There has been news reports in the British newspaper The Telegraph that French President Emmanuel Macron may lead talks on behalf of Europe with Putin to apply some European pressure on the Russians to come to the table on any kind of ceasefire. However, we are still no closer towards that being achieved with Moscow, and no confirmation of that from Paris. So lots more work to be done on the diplomatic front, but on the technical side of things, the Ukrainians are certainly moving forward with their French and British counterparts to discuss any potential deployment force. Now, President Zelenskyy spoke about this on Saturday. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
We had the first meeting to sum things up, marking an important first stage. It is not only the 3 countries that took part in the meeting. Ukraine, France and Britain are part of the process. There are many other countries. I do not want to say how many countries in this coalition yet. It will be a coalition. I think we need about 1 month, no longer, in our view, before we fully understand the structure.
So the Ukrainian government, they're really hoping to yield some tangible results out of these talks between their British and French military chiefs and their Ukrainian counterparts here in Kyiv. So Oz Chatterjee reporting from Kyiv for TVP World.
Karol Nawrocki, the presidential candidate supported by Poland's largest opposition party, Law and Justice, has unveiled his plan to safeguard Polish farmers. His proposal includes stopping the European Green Deal initiative, opposing the EU's Mercosur trade agreement with South America, and imposing tariffs on all agricultural products from outside the EU. Nawrocki's plan aims to secure the interests of Polish farmers and ensure the country's agricultural sector stays competitive amid the surge of Ukrainian food exports. As a net food exporter, Poland exports more food than it imports. The candidate also pledges he will try to form a coalition with countries bordering Ukraine to challenge what he calls the country's unfair competitive advantages in the fields of agriculture and food transport. Poland's border with Belarus remains a battleground in hybrid warfare. According to reports from the Polish military, the intensity of both illegal crossing attempts and attacks on the border guards is escalating daily.
While these clips may appear similar to others published by the Polish Border Guard, they depict new border crossing attempts, of which there are dozens, if not hundreds, every day.
The pressure on the Polish-Belarusian border is increasing. Attacks are more common. Yesterday we saw a group of attackers made up of dozens of people. The brutality of these attacks is increasing. Migrants are throwing rocks and branches, cutting through the border fence with saws.
In just the first 3 days of April, the number of illegal border crossing attempts from Belarus reached 400 cases. The video you're seeing right now shows the latest of these attempts, a group of 22 people trying to slip past the guards. 5 of them stayed behind the fence, reportedly filming the incident to later use it as promotional material for smugglers, encouraging future attempts to travel through Poland to Europe. This, in turn, only motivated the Polish government to not only combat illegal border crossings, but also address the very idea of trying to reach the Polish border.
Soon, we will begin an information campaign in the 7 countries with the largest number of migrants who are trying to illegally cross the Polish border. Our message will be clear. The Polish border is airtight. Do not believe the smugglers. Don't believe Alexander Lukashenko or Vladimir Putin. They are lying to you when they say that this is the entry point into Europe. This is untrue. You will not be able to apply for asylum here, and you will not be able to cross the border illegally.
Poland is also in the process of recruiting more and more people to safeguard its borders. This includes compulsory firearm training for teens, as well as the formation of new military brigades, such as the freshly sworn-in 11th Lesser Poland Territorial Defense Brigade. However, Poland is not alone in its efforts to secure the EU's and NATO's eastern flank. According to Andrius Kubilius, the EU's defense commissioner, new regulations are coming to help bolster defense capabilities for member states.
Cohesion funds, we passed no changes into regulation on cohesion funds in Commission, so now they need to be approved by Council. And we are, with our proposed changes, it will be allowed for member states in a voluntary way to use the cohesion funds which are allocated to them to invest them into development of defense industry.
For now, however, Poland will have to rely on what it has on hand, as the wave of illegal migrants isn't showing signs of waiting for Poland's mass investments in defense industry to pay off in the future. For TVP World, Franciszek Pilis.
Donald Trump's global trade war is already sending shockwaves through the world economy. Stock markets have seen their sharpest decline since his last presidency and the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic that brought global growth to a stop. Experts are now warning that Trump's so-called Liberation Day could end up liberating consumers from their disposable income, triggering a surge in the cost of living, especially for Americans. Konrad Garlinsky breaks down the economic war of choice.
Markets are not responding too well to President Donald Trump's latest tariff decisions. Wall Street closed the week with its biggest losses since the pandemic. The Nasdaq dropped over 10% last week, confirming a bear market for the tech-heavy index. The S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average also saw major declines, despite positive growth in the defense sector. These losses worsened after China announced retaliatory tariffs of 34%.
It's an economic Armageddon that was unleashed by Trump, and the tariff war has begun, and we believe this could set tech stocks and the tech industry in the U.S. back, potentially a decade.
We have a market that is throwing a temper tantrum, frankly, rightfully so.
The situation in Europe wasn't any better. The pan-European stock 600 index dropped over 8%, its sharpest weekly decline since June of 2022. The FTSE in London didn't do much better.
I wouldn't call it a free fall on the financial markets, but rather a sell-off. And the sell-off is ultimately related to the fact that Donald Trump has now set something in motion, which is, of course, a spiral, an escalation spiral.
Here in Poland, the main blue-chip VIG20 index dropped over 10%, while the broader VIG dropped 8% for the week. However, both indices are still at record highs. The Trump administration doesn't seem too concerned. The Secretary of State Marco Rubio shared his take after the recent NATO foreign ministers meeting in Brussels.
No, their economies are not crashing. Their markets are reacting to a dramatic change in the global order in terms of trade. But ultimately, the markets, as long as they know what the rules are going to be moving forward, and as long as that's set and you can sustain where you're going to be, the markets will adjust.
Sentiments may change after further clarifications next week, but as Rubio said himself, a dramatic shift in world trade is underway.
Today, we have for the first time the situation since the end of the Second World War that the United States is essentially turning against the system that it created. And that is new and, frankly speaking, rather unpredictable.
In an early Saturday post, President Trump told followers on his platform Truth Social to hang tough.
This is an economic revolution, and we will win. Hang tough. It won't be easy, but the end result will be historic. We will make America great again.
Economists say the era of multilateral trade agreements marked by institutions like the World Trade Organization looks like it's coming to an end. The future may see countries moving to bilateral trade deals and networks of their own.
In fact, we see this sort of policy already from some period of time. I mean, after the collapse of the last round of WTO, Doha round, it became clear that there is no more room for multilateral trade liberalization.
For the time being, most of the world is waiting to see how this plays out. All could change as soon as next week.
There's a lot that could happen here over the weekend and early next week in terms of clarification.
Saturday saw massive anti-Trump protests in Washington, D.C., across the U.S., as well as Canada and Mexico. Some 150 activist groups have signed up to participate, and there may be a total of more than 500,000 people taking to the streets to oppose what they say is Donald Trump's all-out assault on government, the economy, and basic rights. Conrad Gorlinsky, TVP World.
And just like we heard our reporter tell us, across the United States, hundreds of thousands of Americans took to the streets in cities across the country in more than 1,200 protests against the Trump administration. Now, the so-called hands-off demonstrations were held in all 50 states, as well as in Canada and Mexico, and organizers estimate that more than 500,000 people participated in the U.S. alone. And more than 150 groups helped organize the rallies, including civil rights organizations, labor unions, LGBTQ advocates, veterans, and voting rights activists. Demonstrators voiced anger over the administration's moves to close Social Security Administration field offices, deport immigrants, roll back protection for transgender people, and cut funding for health programs. Tech billionaire and close Trump ally Elon Musk was also widely criticized for his effort to reduce government spending, which led to the firing of thousands of federal workers and dismantling key government agencies. Now, Trump, who shook financial markets around the world earlier this week with his announcement of sweeping tariffs, spent the day playing golf in Florida. And that's all for this edition of World News here on TVP World, but don't go away. Up next, World Talks.